Thank you so much, Des, for giving me the opportunity to speak. This is going to be interesting, seeing as I hadn't really planned for this, but let's see how we go. So how many of you here are actually single, by a show of hands? Okay, so actually the majority of the room, and how many of you are in a relationship, by a show of hands? Okay, cool. So what I wanted to speak to today is 5 myths that I've come across, or that I've seen mainly from my coaching clients or potential clients. Because as I said before, one of the things that I now do is, I've coined the phrase effortless living. And one of the major things that most of my clients come to me for is stress. How many of you find relationships slightly stressful at times, by a show of hands? Yeah. And what I've come to see is that when we live in misunderstanding, this has massive implications on our life, especially relationships. So just as in the past they used to think that bad smells caused disease, it meant that people would walk around with posies to ward off the bad smells. This had implications. Now, it took a little bit of time to figure out that actually germs and bacteria cause disease, not bad smells. So then, of course, this had implications. Then we found out that the world was actually not flat, that that we couldn't fall off it, and that we could actually go around the world and actually do what we needed to do. This had implications. This meant that people could go out and actually go around the world versus thinking that they would fall off it. This meant that people would explore more, and so forth and so on. The same is true of misunderstandings in relationship. If we can see through these misunderstandings that we have, this has implications. So the first myth that I've come to see is the idea that somebody can make us feel something. Now, how many of you have often found yourself saying, you know, I feel really hurt by what that person has done, or have said to yourself, you know, what that person did was hurtful? But what if you were to see that actually those feelings of hurt cannot come from anyone else? They can't come from their behavior. Now, if we can see this for being the truth versus thinking that that person's behavior is causing the feeling, this has huge implications. So what could some of those implications be? Anybody? Any ideas? Sorry? We're responsible for our own feelings. What else?
You can choose how you react.
Yep, what else?
You can choose how you feel.
Yeah. What else? Well, what I've come to see is if they're not responsible for how we feel, then this would suggest that we can take full ownership, that in fact we don't need to become a victim to their behavior. And so what I've come to realize is that actually the feelings come from 100% of our thinking in any given moment. 100%. No more, no less. Now, it may look like the feelings are coming from that person's behavior. So for example, feeling rejected, that person didn't call you back. You think that somehow maybe that the feelings of that are being caused by them not calling you back. But what if that's not true? What if the feelings are 100% generated from how you feel deep within? Because feelings are 100% of our thought in any given moment. Now, for me, this is a big insight that I had around relationships, because I often thought that we did get triggered by people, but we don't, because it's already wrapped up in thought by the time we feel it. Our feelings are just thought. Now, I know that this may be something new to explore. And for me, it's definitely, I mean, I wrote 2 books on the subject matter. talking about processes and techniques that we needed to do in order to not feel hurt, but only to find that actually all it was thought in the moment anyway. That was a big one for me, and I thought, oh crap, I've written an entire book on this. Oh no. But just like with what Graham said earlier on, we can only do where we're at, really, where we are in our thinking in that given moment. The same is true for this particular truth. We can only be who we are in that given moment based on where we are in our thinking process and the history that we've had up until that point. So that would suggest then that the cool thing about that is we don't need to change anyone else or the situation. How many of you have opted for that particular strategy in your lives, wanting to change other people by a show of hands? Yeah. Does it work? No. But the cool thing about this is that we don't need to focus on that anymore. We can actually focus on ourselves. That's a lot easier to work with. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. So the first myth is that actually our feelings don't come from what other people have done. They come from 100% of our thinking in that given moment. The second one is that we're responsible for how we make other people feel. Well, being back here, it would suggest that we're not. Because in fact, we're not responsible for how other people think. So this would suggest then that we don't need to walk around with guilt anymore. Because we're not responsible for how others think. How many of you realize that many people in your life think very differently to you by a show of hands? Yeah. So it would suggest then that we all live in different thought-felt realities. That we all come from this situation completely differently. Now you could put somebody in one situation, same situation, different person, they would react completely differently to it. So me and a friend were sitting watching the sun go down one day, and I just thought, wow, what a beautiful sunset that was. I was feeling calm, I was feeling at peace. But my friend definitely was not. She was fidgeting, she was wanting to get away from this beautiful sunset that we were at, and she wanted to go and eat. She was very hungry at the time. Same situation, very different experience. So what that suggests to me is that we don't need to feel guilty about how somebody else feels, because in fact, they're caught up in their own thought-felt reality as well. So why am I sharing all of this with you so far? Well, what I've noticed is when we can see these sorts of things for what they are, then we don't need to feel responsible. We also have the stress dissolved. Because if we think that anything outside of us is going to make us feel anything, we're constantly looking for things outside of us to make us feel something. But what if we're just looking in the wrong direction? What if the only thing that can make us feel anything is deep within? The third one of these is thinking that there's either right or wrong in relationships. Now, how many of you, actually, let me ask you this. Take your fist and stamp your foot on the floor, go, I'm right.
Right.
Doesn't that feel amazing? Feel really good. I feel, yeah, completely in my element. Well, what I've come to see is, what if there is no wrong or right? What if there's just two different people coming at life from their own truth? Now recently, we were taken to this beautiful lake to paint it. Same group, a beautiful group of people. We all had given the same exercise to do. We all painted it completely differently. Same lake, completely different picture. And I was really taken by that, because what it suggested to me is we can see things on the outside, but how we then interpret them are completely different. Nobody's picture in that room was the same. We were given the same paints, the same tools, paintbrushes, and a piece of paper. Completely different interpretation of that same thing. And that is how we all function in relationship. Different interpretation of the same thing. So what I've come to realize is, what if we came to relationships from the place of curiosity instead? Not assuming that the other person's going to think the same way as we do. Because granted, they won't. But this can make space for a third truth to come through. So there are two truths in relationship, but what about the third? What if we could create the space for a third truth to come in? That way, we can actually really resolve conflict from that place. But the thing that gets in the way of that is ourselves wanting to defend our own realities. I want to defend my reality. No, let me defend my reality. Oh, no, let me defend my reality. So suddenly there are two realities at war. But we can create space for a third reality to show up. And if we could start the conversation from that place, what could change? And what's possible? Because the only thing that ever gets in the way of us being able to have those sorts of conversations is insecurity. Insecurity of who we are, insecurity of what we think. And those are probably not the best times to have those sorts of conversations, which leads me on to the fourth myth, which is this: the content of what you're talking about creates the anxiety or the stress. How many of you have had very heated discussions about money with people, by a show of hands, in your past or in the present? Or is it just me? Well, most divorces happen because it's said that they argue about money. But what if it's not the content that's creating the conflict? And I often have clients saying to me, yeah, but we're really stressed, or we're having a massive issue around money, the children. So it usually focuses on something in the content. But actually, what if it's not the content that's creating the stress? What if it's more about how each of them are communicating with one another? Because I've seen this for myself. My husband and I have had heated discussions about specific things in our lives. But we can talk about the same thing when we're feeling at peace and calm, and we actually find a solution for it. So it suggests that it's not the content that's creating the issue, it's how we're coming to the content that does. Now, the implications of this, well, they're quite interesting, because it actually means that we can open ourselves up to having conversations about things that we ultimately thought that we can't talk about because it's going to create an argument. But actually what this opens us up to is talking about things that we might have found difficult in the past, because it's actually more to do with how we communicate it. I'm learning personally to not communicate things when I'm feeling slightly insecure or angry. And what I've come to realize, like I was I've just come back from Bali with my husband. We were there for 14 months. And at the beginning, when we first got there, I used to sit on a bale and meditate. And there was this one morning, I was sitting there, and suddenly I got bitten by a mosquito. Now, those of you who've been bitten by mosquitoes know that it's not exactly the most enjoyable experience. And usually, I would scratch it first off, and then get some sort of relief, but it would carry on, right? And then it would turn into, a scar, and then, yeah. So I suddenly heard a voice deep within. The voice said, "Don't scratch it, just let it be." And so that's exactly what I did. And 10 minutes, actually I would say 10 minutes, a minute later, the itch had gone. And it occurred to me in that moment, wow, what if we were to have conversations in the presence of that? Where we don't scratch the itch right in the moment that it happens. So in other words, let us have that conversation when we're both calm and in a good place. Because I don't know about you, but I certainly can't trust my thinking when I'm angry or upset. How many of you can trust that by a show of hands? Right, it's not so easy. So wouldn't it suggest that we can actually talk openly about things when we are feeling calm and content? But the other thing that I've realized too is that we're all innocent. And this goes back to my point in the first instance, actually. Now, you may have seen my little boy, Leo, bumbling around. Bundle of joy. But it's hardcore. How many of you have been parents or... Okay. It's hard work, at least physically demanding. So one of those nights that I'm getting up to feed, to change him, and I'm on, he's pooed everywhere, he's peed everywhere, he's puked up everywhere, and all I'm doing is just laughing and enjoying it and having fun with him. And it occurred to me in that moment, I'm like, hang on a second, this is sometimes what we do to people as a metaphor, and we're not going out to poo and pee on people.
Why not?
But don't we actually spit up, vomit, poo, pee on them in the sort of more of a metaphorical sense when we get angry at one another? Or when we get angry at ourselves? And it occurred to me, I'm like, well, why is it then I can be completely fun-loving with him and it doesn't really bother me and it's all good? And I realised, it's because he's innocent. He doesn't know what he's doing. But when we're caught up in our heads, when we're caught up in our own insecurities, we're lost too. Because that's not who we really are. Which leads on to my final myth, which is this. We think we know who we are, but what if we don't? And what implications does that have on relationship? I often hear my clients say to me, but I need fixing, I feel broken. I'm never going to get into a relationship. Or maybe they've just left a relationship and they feel that way too. Or they're in a relationship and they still feel that way. But what if that's not who we are? Our insecurities aren't who we are. The way that we communicate when we're stressed out isn't who we really are. And the implications of this are amazing as well, because it then means that we can't actually lay the blame and shame on ourselves nor the other person. I've often heard people say, but yeah, he's an asshole, or he's this, or she's that, but who we really are is none of that. How do I know? Some may call me completely bonkers. I have weird insights when I'm walking around and minding my own business, and suddenly I hear a voice within that tells me that. So one of these moments was when Leo was in my tummy. It must have been about 4 months, when he was 4 months old. I was 4 months pregnant. So I'm walking to a meeting, and I suddenly hear a voice, and the voice says, Leo is born of this incredible energy that we're all part of. How many of you would agree that in being able to be who we are today, we were fed from this incredible universal intelligence that's around us? How trees grow, how we breathe without even thinking about it. And I suddenly saw something. And I saw that Leo is born of the same thing as we all are. From the formless energy into the form. Now, I suddenly saw that he is God. But not talking about the guy that sits in the heavens with his big staff. I'm talking about the universal intelligence that brings us all into being. And then I got, oh my God, that means we're all God. That really freaked me out. But what it suggested to me was that we walk around with these labels that we give ourselves. But what if we're not none of those labels? And what a difference that would make to ourselves in relationship, dating, and in connection. Because connection is something that we all have. We are the manifestation of connection, love, compassion, when we're not caught up in our stress. And so what I wanted to leave you was this. One night when I was lying in bed, with nobody knowing where I was, I heard the voice again. Now, I don't know, is it only me that has this voice that goes on in my head? Probably. I've just confessed, by the way. And I'm lying there, and I said, I heard the question. The question was, who am I when nobody knows where I am and what I'm doing? And it hit me, and the voice said, I am. That was it. I was waiting for the next part. But the next part didn't come. And then it occurred to me, anything I put in front of I am is just another construct of the mind. Now, what implication does this have actually for relationship? Well, if we can see that we are so much more than what we perceive, if we can see that we're not broken, if we can see that we are whole already, but the only thing that ever gets in the way of that is our insecure thinking, our angry thinking, our mood, then this would suggest that we can connect with that at any given moment because that's who we really are. So, connection is key to creating a beautiful relationship. Connection to ourselves and connection to other. And so with that, if we can see that we're connected, each and every one of us is connected to one another and to self, that we don't need to do anything, then this is really amazing for a relationship, because that way we're not walking around thinking that we're somebody that we're not. We don't think that being in a relationship is going to fix us. We don't need to think that being single says something about who we are. This reduces a huge amount of insecurity. And if we can truly see that we are just the sun behind the cloud from time to time, then there's no need to be anybody else than that. I believe that once we can see how powerful we truly are and who we really are, everything else can fall into place. So for those of you that are single, there's nothing wrong with you. I often hear people say, what's wrong with me? I'm not in a relationship. Well, there's nothing wrong with you. The only thing that gets in the way of that is insecure thinking in the moment. If you're feeling rejected because that person hasn't called you back, don't worry. The feelings aren't coming from what they've done, and it doesn't say anything about you at all. It's just insecure thinking in the moment. So this allows us to be free, to be single and be happy. It allows us to be in relationship, to be happy? Because there's this ideal that we all want to aspire to be in this loving, creative relationship. But that starts with ourselves and seeing who we truly are in that moment. So I just want to gauge where you're at. How many of you have kind of seen something maybe different to what you may not have seen before, by a show of hands? This is how life truly does work. And when we can see that we don't need anything outside of us to make us feel anything, complement us, we are free to be who we truly are. And who we truly are is love, peace, contentment. And that's what we're really searching for. What we're really searching for is inner peace. Thank you.